Interlude, Marin, Chapter 55-57. Lord Aaron Dane was unhappy with their new allies, he noted, as the man in question paced the deck of the ship. He would stop occasionally to direct a glare out at the spectacle before them before beginning once again. He did not need to ask why. Lord Aaron was merely the most vocal of the lords, but he was well aware there were more who disliked the idea of working with slavers than who'd approved. The Dornish fleet maneuvered ever closer to the port of Bloodstone. Ahead of them, the Triarchy barges ferried men to land where they swarmed the gates to the keep and were slaughtered in a deadly killing zone for their trouble. For every man that died, one made it through. It would only be a matter of time before the gates fell and they could land. Land and show the world what the Dornish did to dragons. He would prove himself the warrior his brother needed him to be. He had little head for politics, that was Corrin's wheelhouse. He may be young, but he was a father already and a good ruler to his people. He had won Dorne's respect with wise decisions and hard work. He knew that the dragons had been fermenting rebellion amongst the stony Dornish, paying bards and singers to tell tales of the evils of slavery. As for himself, he'd wanted to repay them in kind, send some of those poisoned words right back in the form of whispers about the fat king's daughter or the green queen she threw herself against. Corrin had put a stop to it. His brother wanted the mad dragon on their border gone first, and he wanted the honor of Dornishmen doing the deed. It amused him. Would the fat king pay them the bounty he'd put on his own brother's head if they tried to claim it? He allowed himself to imagine killing the mad dragon personally. The glory, the accolades. Perhaps Daemon was the worthier target. There was plenty of time to deal with the fat dragon, after all, and only a small window to claim the head of the mad one. The mad one that had tried to kill his own niece if the rumors were true. He smirked at that, but it was a bitter one. The dragons only cared when one of their own were hurt. Where was the justice for the tens of thousands of lives taken in the Dornish conquests? Yet one failed assassination had all the little lions, wolves and fishes scrambling to strike back, scrambling to please their scaled overlords. Let those lesser creatures bow. In his mind, the Targaryens were no better than the slavers they allied with now. Their kind had founded the Triarchy. Why are we waiting? They're dying in the thousands, demanded Lord Dane, snapping the younger brother of the Prince of Dorne out of his thoughts. Let the Triarchy waste their men into Daemon's defenses. We will move in afterwards, his brother said. Dane colored red. Those are slaves they're sending into the meat grinder. Slave soldiers. Dane protested. Corrin frowned. It is distasteful, but the sea snake knew what he was doing when he built up Bloodstone. Would you rather Dornish men marched into that death trap? A shame he could not prevent the mad dragon from burning Spicetown, he sneered, and his brother's men chuckled in response. Corrin remained frowning, turning his face back to the bloody fighting in the distance. We have yet to see the mad dragon or his mount, his brother pointed out. The chuckles died at that. Caraxes was a fearsome beast by all reports, and Daemon had only grown more brutal with it as his support dried up. They'd all passed the destroyed ships, the burned wrecks, that he'd left littering the approach to Bloodstone. A warning. Caraxes took a few bolts in his last flight, according to the Tyroshi, grunted Warren Will. It's injured and ripe for the slaying. Care to end another dragon, Lord Trystane? As the Euler Lord smiled, he considered the will. He sent shivers up his spine. He'd never met a man from that family that wasn't a nasty piece of work. If Dorne were to survive the dragons, they needed that nastiness. They needed these slavers. A necessary evil, his brother had said. Daemon Targaryen was a threat to Dorne. If he somehow secured the stepstones, Dorne would be next in his sights. Corrin would not risk handing little Aeliandra a smoking crater as her birthright. If they played this right, he may yet hand her a strong Dorne that had power over the narrow sea via the stepstones. That would show those sniveling, cringing Bravosi in the too proud Pentoshi. As they watched, smoke began to rise, twisting into the air, as the Triarchy soldiers breached the port's defenses, and what little men Daemon had left to him ignited the town behind them as they retreated to the keep. Corrin smiled then, and the signal went out. He felt excitement coil in his gut as he readied his spear. The Dornish would land, they would storm the keep, and they would end one dragon. The others would come in time. The time it took to make the landing felt like an eternity. He wanted to be gone. Whilst he was stuck here, another might claim the glory. Finally, they disembarked. His brother by his side, wielding his own spear. Men in Martell livery flowing around them. Dane had been right about one thing. The slave soldiers had died in droves to breach the gates. Their corpses slowed the Dornish assault, but not even Balerion the Black Dread could stop them now. This was a reckoning. Justice. There was a roar in his ears and it was echoed by the men he led toward the keep proper. They passed more dead slaves on the way and surrendering sellswords, pirates and slavers. He gave them no quarter. There would be no prisoners here. They had been given months to run, to find new employment. Months to stab the man that led them in the back and claim the spoils of their rewards. They'd had days to open the gate to the keep, days to sabotage the town's defenses. No. There would be no mercy now. He killed 3 men as they battled their way forward. One had been surrendering but the other 2 had come at him with death in their eyes. He stayed close to Corin. For all his dreams of glory, all would be lost if Corin died now. Little Aleandra was only one. He killed another as they began the storming of the keep. By the 7, the keep. He forced down bile at the bodies. They'd all died hard. Some had been hung badly, some had been crucified, some had been burned, others left to rot in gibbets. Mad dragon indeed. What drove men to such acts? There could be no doubt that this man needed to die. He followed the press of bodies, becoming aware of a distant roaring bellow. A dragon. His heart raced at the thought of meeting one. The blood Wirm. Caraxes. Even injured it would sell itself dearly. It had sent thousands to their deaths. It had been the mount of 2 Targaryen princes. And, he reminded himself, where Caraxes was his rider would not be far behind. No doubt he thought he could flee justice on its back. Maybe he thought he could find sanctuary in Volantis, Bravos, or Pentos. Maybe he would be foolish enough to go back to the Fat King. It didn't matter. He would not get the chance. Corin would ensure every man in Dorne knew what Daemon had done here, the horrors he'd perpetrated. Let the Fat King think on that as he sat upon his pile of twisted, cursed metal. The first of the explosions took him completely by surprise. Another pained scream cut through the manse and I winced without being able to help myself. Across from me, Laenor tapped out an anxious beat with the heel of his boot. Joffrey was leant forward, eyes on the fire in the grate. Both were tense beyond measure and I could easily match them. I should be in there with her. I was a woman, I was allowed. Yet she demanded Alanis and Rhaenys remove me the moment her waters broke. The beat Laenor was tapping out changed again and I flinched, grinding my teeth together in annoyance. The urge to strangle him peaked for a moment and I flexed my aching fingers. Joffrey raised his head and caught my eye, a rueful smile growing over his face. Then the door banged open, all 3 of us jumping in fright, and Corlys stalked in. "How is she?" he asked, breaking the heavy silence. "We have as much news as you," Joffrey replied, voice strained. Laenor stopped his tapping at my second heated glare and instead took Joffrey's hand, dropping a kiss to his fingers. My mind searched for a distraction as Corlys glared at Joffrey. In the week since the duel, Alicent's Greens had hemorrhaged supporters. It gave me hope that this may yet be resolved without war, but that didn't mean I wasn't about to deliver a coup de grace so to speak. I could wait it out. I should wait it out, but a panicked animal backed into a corner was at its most dangerous. All she would need to do to rescue the Greens was wait and rebuild in the shadows. If Viserys drops dead at a similar time in canon it gives her nearly a decade and a half to turn it around. So I was going to make damn sure they couldn't. Have you given much thought to what I suggested? I asked Joffrey finally. Another cry delayed his response and gave Laenor and Corlys time to turn curious eyes towards me. I have a few ideas. Are you truly sure about this? It is an escalation. You have always be dash. She could have killed him. If he hadn't been training these past few months she may well have, I said coldly. She will be dangerous now, looking for the next opening and he will be by her side through all of it. What are you planning? Asked Corlys, looking to me and Joffrey after he realized even Laenor did not know. It's not a plan yet, Joffrey assured him. Someone ran down the stairs and yelled for something, voice indistinct, and Laenor stood up, agitated. Are we seriously discussing schemes and plots whilst Lena is giving birth? He asked, looking aggrieved. Yes, I told him, then turned back to Joffrey. And it will be a plan. He sighed and rubbed at his face. Lena had gone into labor before he'd had the chance to shave this morning and it showed. This is revenge. It is not needed. I was about to let him have it, pointed out that he would have lost just as much as I had. Alicent's scheme succeeded when Corlys cut in. Speak plainly, he barked. I rubbed at my sore fingers and sighed. Alicent has lost her children, the good opinion of her husband, and she's losing lords at an astonishing rate. Joffrey opened his mouth to interrupt, but I silenced him with a look. It's true. She has only one person she can turn to in all of this. Corlys sat back in his chair. Steps pounded up the stairs and a scream sent us all tensing again. Otto. You think she'll bring Otto back to King's Landing, he said finally. Laenor looked as if he'd just been fed something foul. Viserys banished him. He won't bring him back now. Not when Alicent has so fallen out of favor, said Laenor, eyes flicking to Joffrey as if asking for confirmation. Joffrey returned the look with an unhappy one. Viserys has two blind spots of sorts. Rhaenyra and Alicent. Should Alicent play the good wife for a year or two? Well, who knows, Joffrey finally said as if it was dragged from him by Laenor's gaze. And if he does come back he'll retake control of the Greens, my husband said, voice cold. I have become quite tired of those rabble-rousers. They threaten our child. Alicent will always threaten our child, but Otto. Otto is the greater threat should she get him back to the capital, I told him. Laenor nodded along with my words and Joffrey shot me a look. Otto Hightower is a menace, serving under two weak kings has given him a swollen sense of his own importance. Viserys should have never married Alicent, it only encouraged him, opined Corlys, but I could see he was interested. His scheming had been vastly curtailed under my control, but the mind that would have seen a Valerian royal house was still there and eager to chew over another problem. You intend to remove him from the game permanently? I didn't bother with assent. He knew. I could see the savage smile growing across his face in turn. Valerian and Hightower interests had begun to clash shortly after Corlys had ascended to the Lord of the Tides. It had started with shipping and had only gotten worse in the years leading up to Otto becoming Hand. I do wonder if Jaehaerys had wanted him as Hand to counter Corlys' influence, still strong even after the Great Council. If so, that was another thing I could blame on my great-grandfather. Kill him. That is going a bit too far. Laenor exclaimed. Joffrey looked triumphant. No. This is needed. Alicent will call him and he is a snake. If we kill him we end him as a threat and send a message to Alicent that I will not roll over should she try to hurt our child again. A message, he mused, scratching his chin. Then his eyes went to his father. What would you see done? I'd see that wretch dead and his whore daughter too, Corlys growled and Joffrey groaned, putting his head in his hands. Alicent is too well guarded. Food tasters, reach knights, intermediaries Joffrey started, cruelly stamping on my dreams. So is Otto, Corlys pointed out. I smiled sweetly at Joffrey who just sighed, probably regretting telling me about a certain bit of information from his factor in Old Town. Not, necessarily, he finally sighed as my smile didn't fade. He has a taste for women. He won't find that in the Red Keep. Oh, breathed Laenor, that predatory smile growing across his features once more. Only for it to flicker and die as Lena cried out in pain once more. Do not worry for her. Rhaenys will fight the stranger himself if he comes for her, Corlys said, fondly. One day I would have to get the story as to how they met, agreed to marry and fell in love. Corlys struck me as a man who had wanted her for her royalty and she struck me as the person to hate that with every fiber of her being. Now explain this realization you just came to. It has to do with the nature of my Joffrey started but I cut him off, not willing to dance around the issue for Corlys' benefit. He owns brothels. It's how he gathers a lot of his information. Joffrey glared at me and I suppressed the urge to stick my tongue out at him. Corlys let out an explosive breath and stood once more, pacing back and forth. You have my support for this providing you can come up with a decent plan of attack, he said finally. If you should need anything, I am at your disposal. You have mine too, said Laenor and Corlys paused in his pacing to stare in bafflement. He frowned in response. Otto and Alicent will kill my child, kill my wife, my sister and Joff as well. Why should I not help defend them? Corlys nodded and clapped his son on the shoulder again and Laenor looked ready to burst from pride at the action. Joffrey just sighed and looked tired. If this goes wrong we risk every single gain made in that duel, he said. If this goes wrong, your father will likely strip you of your title. If it goes right, we cripple any resurgent Greens. If this goes right, we remind Alicent that if she plays stupid games with us she will win only stupid prizes, I replied and a ghost of a smile worked its way across his face. He rubbed at his stubble again. I shall have to remember that turn of phrase. Very well. I will begin working on a method to bring Otto to King's Landing and to his death. Thank you, Joffrey, I said and I meant it. A knock on the door and an exhausted maid peered into the room. My lords, your grace. We all stood as one. They are ready for you. It was hard to say who cleared the room faster. Probably Laner, but only because he had longer legs. Even Joffrey managed an impressive spurt of speed given his leg. It was frustrating to have to let everyone else go before me before I could wedge myself into the room that had been the extent of Lena's existence for the past 3 weeks. She was alive. Alive and conscious, even if she did look awful. I suppose nobody looked good after giving birth. She clutched at a sobbing bundle of cloth, fixing it with wide eyes as if she was not even daring to believe it real. Rhaenys, seated by her side, chuckled as we all piled in and immediately crowded the new mother. Seems you're the proud father to healthy son, Joffrey, she laughed. Lena finally looked up at us, an almost shy look in her eye as she moved the bundle forward a little for us to see. Silver hair and violet eyes. Apart from that, he looked the same as every other baby in existence. Small and pink. His low sobbing became a warbling cry and Lena pulled him back, fussing at him in an almost panic. That earned her another laugh from her mother. Don't worry so much over him. Babies cry, it's not a failing on your behalf, she assured her daughter. I know. You've told me 1,000 times, Lena rasped back, her voice clearly not quite recovered from the screaming. I never ceased crying and Laner was as quiet as a dormouse. Then she turned her gaze back to her son with eyes full of worship and wonder. Corlys smiled indulgently at the sight. New grandfather and new grandmother. Joffrey shuffled forward then, a look I did not understand on his face, and peered over Lena's shoulder. She caught his eye and smiled, shifting so that he could see Lucerys once more. His brown eyes softened and he extended a finger. A small pink hand met it, flailing at the unfamiliar object. Then my spymaster smiled broadly. Hello Lucerys, he said. Welcome to the family. I'm the only sane one here. That sent Rhaenys into peals of laughter and even got a chuckle from Lena. Corlys just snorted and Laner looked as if someone had just kicked a puppy in front of him. Your Grace. I blinked at the intrusion and turned. A maid stood in the door, worried look etched over features. It's, well, King Viserys is here. I was out of that room so fast one might be forgiven for thinking I'd been set on fire. Laner was at my heels looking just as worried. What the hell was he doing here? The Valerians did not know, surely he had not come to see his nephew? Viserys was indeed standing in the drawing room, face a riot of emotions. Father. I called and his attention fell on me. Before I could question him further he drew me into a hug and heaved a heavy sigh into my shoulder. What is wrong? He pulled back. I needed to know you were safe, he said finally. I needed. What has happened? I said, fear spreading through my body. Laner linked our arms and I let myself lean against him slightly. It is Daemon. Laner drew in a sharp breath. Daemon had been behind Corey, he was likely behind Mushroom's death. I braced myself for bad news. The Triarchy and the Dornish launched an assault on that island of his, Bloodstone. He burned so much of their fleet that the harbor was nearly unusable until they brought Caraxes down. I gasped at that. Rhaenys had grieved for that dragon a long time ago, but I knew she would grieve anew for him. Caraxes isn't dead, but it gave them an opening. So they took the island? What news of that bastard? I asked. Daemon fleeing was not ideal, but his loss of the stepstones was a bonus for us. Shipping would begin to return to normal now. My heart dropped like a rock as Viserys shook his head again. I fear Bloodstone has earned its name. Daemon, the reports are not clear. We think he set off a cache of wildfire. By the 7. Laner choked out. I could only stare in horror. Wildfire meant alchemists. The alchemists were mine. Was this what he intended the distraction for? He fled. Left the Dornish and slaves to their doom and he fled. We know not where he has gone. I walked into the rooms Lena occupied at the manse and promptly walked out again as her musical laughter followed me. I waited for a while before her still amused voice called me back in. She was seated on the low couch but fully clothed at least. Lucerys gurgled happily from her arms, clearly fighting sleep as his eyes closed occasionally. I swallowed at the reminder. Gerardis and Alanis put me at around 13 weeks. I was closer to the halfway point than not and it terrified me. You must knock if you intend to be so prudish about the matter. Lena chuckled. I blushed a fiercer red in response. Not even Felena is so disturbed by the sight of Lucerys feeding. Look, it's a thing, I sighed. She chuckled, amused smirk in place, then gestured me over. Gods, hadn't that been a surprise? Rhaenys was a big proponent of personally feeding your kids and not leaving it to a group of faceless women whose only qualifications were having the milk on hand. Dragons need another dragon. Fish, lions and stags will not do, she growled when I'd pushed the issue. She'd clout me when I'd pointed out she had said Jocelyn had done the same for her and Jocelyn was a Baratheon. Of course, she expected me to do the same with my babe. She had her heart set on the matter. I was less convinced. I'm sure everyone would definitely take me seriously and it wouldn't at all get in the way of my duties as heir. I had a feeling it would be a wait-and-see matter. I did not know whether it was Rhaenys' preferences or an actual thing after all. Valyrians were said to be part dragon and I did not know if I could forgive myself if something happened to the babe and I could have prevented it. As I sat opposite her, Lena shuffled the sleepy child into my arms, leaving me to rock him gently as she got up to pour herself some of the fruit tea her mother had recommended. A month had done a lot to change Lucerys. He now looked like an actual baby at least. He wasn't even bad as babies go. Both Aegon and Aemond had never stopped crying, even Helena had sulked endlessly, but little Lucerys seemed quite solemn. He cried when he was hungry or when he needed changing and that seemed to be it. Gods, I hoped I got that lucky with my own, especially if Rhaenys intended to knife me if I didn't feed them personally. I peered around her room, sad that I could no longer claim the manse as home, no longer invade to bother her when the fear became too much. With no more murders and the biggest suspect in the wind, Viserys had made it clear he wanted me back in the Red Keep. I had been reluctant to return but, well, my relationship with Viserys had been odd since Laenor had won his duel. I'd expected him to make a comment about Lucerys or Lena, to use that stick he had so recently found, but instead he just took my reluctance like a bolt to the heart. It threw me off badly enough that I eventually agreed. Laenor was still in the manse though, ostensibly to help his nephew take his first steps into the world. The rest of my ladies had been given the day off. Normally I'd stagger it so I always had at least 2 or 3, but when I went to visit Lena, maybe it was selfish but I preferred to have her to myself. I so rarely got to see her, even if she had technically returned to my service as a lady. The few times I did get to see her, well, Lucerys was always in tow and she was quick to parrot Alanis, Maria and even Felena's lines about babes, being pregnant and the mother. It was weird. I sulked slightly as stared down at the babe in question. That he had inherited the silver hair and violet eyes of his parents wasn't such an issue. It was simple to point out he favored his mother and not his Stormlander father. Given that Alicent's children were all Valyrian, she couldn't exactly approach from that angle. Not that she was doing anything at the moment. She was in damage mode, playing the good queen perfectly. How many would remember Daemon's face in a decade or two? How many would remember it well enough to pick out his features in Lucerys? Did it even matter anymore? Daemon was gone. No more did he crouch on the stepstones like a gargoyle, waiting for a sign of weakness to strike. The Triarchy and the Dornish had seen to that. Daemon had seen to them in turn. The Dornish were a nation led by children now, a potential civil war in the making, and the Triarchy were already sizing each other up, just waiting for a chance to plant a dagger in their rivals' backs now that the man who had united them was gone. Westeros was safer than it had ever been. Yet I couldn't be happy, couldn't take joy in any of it. Because he wasn't dead. He'd be back. He couldn't let go. He'd want Lena, he'd want his son. I needed to find him, needed to kill him, before he returned at the most inconvenient time. Before he harmed my own child, but Ser Joffrey barely had a hold on Westeros, spies and Essos were a long way off. Rhaenyra? Lena's gentle voice cut into my musing. She was sat opposite me once more, sipping at her tea, with a look of concern etched into her face. You went away a bit there. My apologies. I was thinking, I replied, shifting my grip on Lucerys, who cooed in response and began chewing on my shawl. Brooding, you mean? You have been doing that a lot lately, she said. Alani said it is bad for the babe to brood as much as you do. My babe can handle my brooding. They will be a dragon. Lena snorted in response and I smiled. Father is still furious, she said finally, as if she were arguing with herself as to whether she should even bring it up. I smiled thinly. In the aftermath of the news about Daemon, I had brought the issue up with Laenor and together we'd both gone to Viserys. My children needed to be dragons, not seahorses. Laenor had reasoned that any child that inherited Driftmark would take the Valerian name, but my children deserved to bear the name Targaryen. Corlys had been furious. He'd wanted a Valerian grandchild on the throne, but Rhaenys had understood, had promised to talk him round. She knew that Laenor's name had spoken against him at the Great Council, that if I wanted every advantage I could get, I needed my children to be Targaryens. And I wanted every advantage now. Viserys had agreed so readily, I wondered if he had not had the thought himself at some point. I'd barely gotten through the request before his happy nodding had tipped me to the idea it would be far easier than I had thought it would be. Lord Corlys must have known that my child would take the name Targaryen upon inheriting the throne. This is just speeding up the process. Besides, he has calmed a little these past few days. By which I meant he had managed to say hello without looking to be on the verge of stroking out. Any goodwill my plan to murder Otto had brought me was likely gone though. The egg helped, I think, Lena mused. Surprisingly, Viserys had brought up the egg situation before Rhaenys or Lena could. He'd been happy to approve an egg from one of Malay's clutch being given to the young boy. A happiness that had taken most of the Valerians off guard. I still hadn't told them he knew. He hadn't pushed the issue recently and he'd spent most of Rhaenys' thank you speech looking at me like a puppy I just kicked. Regardless, Viserys was now the proud owner of a dark red dragon's egg. Lena was desperate for it to hatch, I could tell she was. It was probably inconceivable to her that any child of hers would be denied the sky. Viserys, on the other hand, liked kicking it and drooling on it, and that was the extent of his expectations from the egg. Another dragon rider for House Valerian and the Blacks, I said as Viserys released my shawl and swiped at my hand as I shifted his position again, struggling to account for his wriggling. I moved my fingers over his face to distract him, dodging the pudgy hands attempting to seize them. Babies were bizarre creature. He couldn't even see my face or focus on my hand, yet he was still doing his best to catch it. How goes your secret project? I asked once I'd grown bored of the chase and surrendered my little finger to his toothless gnawing. Lena raised an eyebrow before snorting. It goes well, if you must know. But I'm still not telling you what it is. I hadn't even been able to pull it out of Joffrey beyond an assurance it wasn't a plan to overthrow me and place her mother on throne or anything equally as drastic. He seemed rather amused by it all, actually. I shall get the details out of you soon enough, I told her. Lena smirked in response to my challenge and poured me some juice. I relinquished Viserys back to her, grimacing when I had to wrestle him for possession of my finger. You'll be a good mother, Rhaenyra. I know it, she said as she calmed Viserys' fussing. I took a drink of the juice and suppressed a sigh. Look how good you are with little Luke. He chews on me, Lena. I'm not sure that's the world's greatest indicator of a good mother, I said dryly. Luke loves you. He's always smiling away when you hold him, Lena said as if that was that on the matter. Said baby was snatching at his mother's hair and still fighting sleep as valiantly as any night. Now, do you think we should have lunch? I groaned at the reminder. Breakfast had been an ordeal this morning and my stomach was reminding me of that fact as well as the fact that it still thoroughly intended to challenge anything I put in it. That depends, Lena, on whether it's trout wrapped in bacon with a side of greens. Lena had the sense to flush a little at the rebuke. Because we've had that every day I've been here this week. We can have anything you want, Your Grace, she said, voice as sweet as honey. I let her see my narrowed eyes before she broke down giggling. Honestly, Rhaenyra, we can. I just want you well for when the babe comes. I have Alanis to lecture me about food, Lena. What I need is someone to bring me illicit bacon, I grumbled. Old Lena would have brought me illicit bacon and eaten it with me as we hid from Joffrey's all-knowing eye and Alanis' disappointment. New Lena was frustratingly responsible. You don't need me to obtain bacon, Rhaenyra, she said primly, and I grimaced at the implication. Sadly, it was true. I was putting on weight. It was starting to get just slightly noticeable. Dresses that needed to be let out, the slight thickening of my features, my stomach now more pronounced, it frightened me. Rhaenyra in canon had lost her looks in pregnancy. Admittedly, she had 3 in rapid succession. I hoped I'd have as much ease losing the baby weight as Lena was having. I may have to start thinking on a change of dresses. My veil style that served to show off my figure whilst leaving everything to the imagination with occasional reach cut thrown in was rapidly becoming unsuitable. What gave it away? I asked ruefully and she snorted in amusement, wiggling her fingers and getting Viserys' attention away from her hair. We could stroll down to the bakery tomorrow. Something to look forward to after your checkup, she suggested. I gave her a thin smile and finished my juice. You do not want me to stay in my room and panic all day, and you are using unfair tactics to stop me. I was somewhat grateful. She may not be willing to indulge me anymore, but at least she wasn't going to let me suffer alone. Also, I really liked those honey almond tarts they sold. When it comes to your babe you lose yourself too easily to panic. It was why I was advised to keep you from Lucery's birth, you know. I breathed in relief at that. I had not known, but that sounded like something Joffrey might have done. Your husband? I asked. Lena shook her head. Gerardis actually. Joffrey was the one who assigned Alanis to you. He said she was perfect for dealing with panicky new mothers, she asked, handing Lucerys back over. He wiggled again as I held him close before chewing on my shawl once more. And here I was thinking I'd requested her. Remind me to punch him for it later, I said, then bent my face to Lucerys, putting on a high-pitched voice. Yes. Remind me to punch your father. Interfering little toe rag he is. Yes. Instead, Lucerys punched me square on the nose with a ear-splitting screech and Lena nearly fell out of her seat with laughter. How is Joffrey with Lucerys? I asked when she, and my ears, had recovered. He's fantastic. He reads to him every night. Little Luke loves him, her tone was quiet and soft. I was not sure of their relationship in truth. Joffrey played the perfect husband in the way Laenor did, and Laenor had confided in me that Joffrey did not have the same issues with women that he had. Lena did, of course, but, well, it seemed terribly uncouth to just ask. I note Rhea is still showering him with gifts, I remarked, causing the girl to blush a deep red. That Rhea doted on Lucerys like he was a favored nephew of sorts was a source of endless embarrassment to Lena and always fun to bring up in conversation. Has she mentioned anything to you about marriage? No, she only asks about Luke, she mumbled as I fought the urge to giggle. With Daemon's flight from the Stepstones and his destruction of the Triarchy and Dornish troops, Viserys had given in. Rhea was a free woman now. The Lady of Runestone, heirless and still of childbearing age, was hot property on the marriage market. Rhea seemed to be enjoying being courted though, she was taking her time. I guess she didn't want to risk another awful husband. Lena's voice caused me to glance up. I never did thank you, did I? For? I asked, somewhat confused. She flushed. You may have been after my dragon and I am still upset about that, but it would have been bad if you had let me go to him. So, thank you. I do not know what I would have done had I been stuck on that island with him as he descended into madness. I cannot say that I would not have followed him. Maria had been in my service just over a year and I had to say, I was beyond impressed with what she'd done in that time. I could even forgive her ongoing one-sided romance with Helena's sworn sword because she'd taken my vague ideas of charity and created, well, the best way I could describe it was a sort of proto-social care. Clinics to help with family planning, several orphanages, soup kitchens and food banks. There were even talks of expanding the clinics to deal with minor injuries and sicknesses. All in my name. No wonder the people of the capital loved me. The children of the Mother Isella house for orphans lined up before me, the boys and girls all dressed as neatly as they could be and freshly bathed. It was sort of sweet the way they all gave their clearly hastily taught bows and obeisances, sloppy but enthusiastic. Even if the royal family lived in this city, an orphan from Flea Bottom was never likely to see a member in their lives. So polite and courteous, you have done well with these children. At my praise the two septas blushed and stammered their thanks. Until Maria and Felena had gotten involved, this orphanage had been run down and neglected, the bare minimum provided by the faith to ensure the children did not die of starvation or exposure. At 14, they'd leave whether they had homes or not, jobs or not, as like as not half would have been dead over the next year. King's Landing is not a nice place to be if you lack a home or income. A grim reminder of how fortunate I was to be a princess, even one that will face a succession war, than Joe Peasant on the streets. In truth, it still wasn't that much better, but the building was well maintained, everyone had sturdy and clean clothes and 2 warm meals a day. We are very proud of the children here, said Septa Elaine. And we cannot thank your grace enough for the money and aid you have provided. I hardly deserve your thanks, Lady Stokeworth and Lady Waynwood are the architects. I believe we all should attempt to be more like them, I hastily assured the woman. Maria beamed and Felena smiled, but I was honest enough to feel a twist of guilt. I was only here on this tour because my appointment was this afternoon and I desperately needed something to take my mind off of the whole business. Your Grace is truly too kind and modest too, Maria began. It was her actions that inspired my own. When I came into her service she was working towards this goal also. And now I feel really guilty. I am probably a bad person. And now we have 3 such orphanages. I said, and Septa Elaine nodded. Well, every little bit helps. I am always a believer in kindness to others. Would you like to hear the children sing you a hymn, Your Grace? Septa Elaine asked, and I surveyed the row of hopeful faces and put a practiced smile into place. Of course, I would be honored. I don't know if you've ever heard 50 children under the age of 14 trying their best to sing a hymn most only know by memory, but the result is not that great. I recognized the tune at least. A Hymn to the Mother. I suppressed the lurch of fear that bought and managed to smile throughout it. Afterwards I lavished praise on them all, gave them all a silver star each, and went to make my way back to the horses alongside Maria and Felena, both who looked more pleased than I have ever seen them. We're hoping to acquire another by next month. Ser Joffrey has been endlessly helpful in that regard, Maria told me as we began moving. Ser Stefan Darklin and my men moving into position around us like silent but very well armed and armored shadows. Viserys had insisted he would not pry into what I did with Ser Stefan. That he was my white knight as Cole had once been, but I was still hesitant to let him in on everything. It helped that Joffrey thought he was honest for now. He may not remain so if Viserys changed his mind. Truly a worthy endeavor. I must ask though, surely the funding I donate does not pay for all of this? At my question, Felena snorted. In truth, your direct funding covers a quarter of the costs. Ser Joffrey gives us his excess budget, but we also get donations from your blacks and the faith. Felena is the one that covers our finances, if you couldn't tell, chuckled Maria. And here I thought the faith objected to everything I did these days, I observed, noting the two ladies immediately scowl. Eustace had been on the High Septon's business that day. Now the preachers whispered of unnatural potions and devices, of soulless women divorced from the faith. My attempts to expand the midwives beyond King's Landing and the narrow sea had foundered somewhat. What before had been a wildfire was now an uphill climb, and they had not stopped there. My association with the Wisdoms, my charities, the accusations surrounding Laener's tastes, Lena being pregnant before marriage, nothing was sacred to the rumor-mongering idiots. It was Alicent's work, I was sure of it, but in this case I could believe she had started it off long before Laener had humbled her. It still did not make it any easier not to punch her teeth down her throat. Septon Eustace objected, Your Grace, but you will find more than a few members of the faith in this city who appreciate the work those women do. That we do, Felena told me, her voice hard. Even Maria's permanently cheery face had gone dark. Have I kicked over a wasp's nest? I asked, and Maria's laugh was actually bitter. If it weren't for Septon Patrick we wouldn't even have the funding we get now, she cried. I quirked an eyebrow up in interest. Septon Patrick? He leads the members of the faith that are willing to work with us. Something of a firebrand, Felena sniffed. Oh. Division in the ranks of the faith? Do tell me everything you know. It's nothing too serious, Your Grace. Septon Patrick he is openly critical of the faith, but he holds a lot of sway in the city. He cares for its people in a way that most do not, Maria elaborated at my raised eyebrow, misunderstanding my concern. Then she added in a guilty tone. He preaches from Visigna's Hill. Critical? I mused. That he preached from Visigna's Hill was interesting. There was always someone up there trying to raise a great scandal, either against the nobility, foreigners, or the faith itself. They usually burned themselves out after a few months. That or got themselves killed or arrested. Or, I reminded myself sternly, managed to raise such a crowd that they successfully invade the dragon pit and end the lives of 5 adult dragons. It is, not quite respectable. But he believes in our cause, to feed and clothe the innocent. To ensure children can have a childhood and that women are not left to die. I blinked in surprise at the normally taciturn Felena's outburst. Perhaps I will meet with this Septon Patrick, if he is willing, I said, in way of apology. Playing with the faith was dangerous, Cersei had discovered that, but investigating his whole deal might be worth it if it means I can get Eustace off my back. I just have to remember not to let him get within 5 meters of the words faith militant. I will ask him, Your Grace, the next time we meet, Felena assured me, relaxing slightly. He thinks well of you. Thank you, Felena. Truly, I think I got the better of your father when you entered my service. Maria giggled at that. It was hard to remember Felena was the giant Lord Dennis' daughter. Felena may be tall, but she was slender. Lord Dennis was a monster of a man. Rumor had it the mountain clans feared him more than the rest of the Falcons put together. The thought of the Vale brought a pang of loss. I already missed my little sister, but Jane reported she had arrived safe and was doing well. Jane had also reported that she would consider the marriage issue. Admittedly in a stiffly formal letter that had set my heart plummeting into my stomach. It had been far from the teasing tone we often took with one another. He hasn't complained yet, Felena assured me, startling me from thoughts about how badly I had messed up with my cousin. Is it not time for your checkup soon? I suppressed the urge to bolt as I was escorted home. It made me wonder if the guards around me were for my protection or to stop me from bolting to Syrax and running away to live in Essos where no one would ever require me to have children. A girl can dream. Lena was waiting for me and Maria greeted her with a hug before cooing over little Luceris. Felena was more reserved, but most of my ladies, even the sharp-tongued Maris Grafton, were enchanted by the little tyke. I honestly don't know why, all he did was sleep and eat. You know, they've even stopped playing cards in their spare time. They just all moon over Luceris now. It's weird, okay. Once Maria and Felena had relinquished me into Lena's custody, they were bundled off for a nice meal at Valerian expense, and I was all but frog-marched into my sometimes rooms and changed into the thin white gown that Alanis insisted I wear to every checkup. I tried not to resent the fact it felt tighter every time I put it on. May I? Asked Lena as I sat on the bed. May you what? She gestured to my stomach and gave a limp wave of her hand. I got the meaning though. Oh. If you want. Honestly, if even I haven't felt anything, I doubt you will. It is odd to think it's Laner's child, my niece or nephew, in there, she murmured as her hand fell to my stomach. Rhaenyra, has he said anything to you about Luceris? No. Why? She was cut off as the door opened and Alanis stepped in. The maid who had escorted her bowed and then left. Your Grace, how are you feeling today? She asked as she dropped her bag down. How is the sickness? Straight to the point then. I could appreciate that. It is better but still not great, I sighed. She raised an eyebrow at my tone. And everything itches, I'm swelling up, putting on weight, hair is growing where it shouldn't, and I still can't be 5 minutes away from the privy at any given time. That's all quite common, pronounced but common, she said and began rummaging in her bag. Why does anyone even get pregnant? I groused. Alanis ignored me in favor of producing a leather-bound book with a flourish. For the babe at the end, murmured Lena. For their own little Luceris. Of course, and given how everything has gone so far, you'll have Westeros' best-behaved baby, and I'll have some screaming spawn of the seven hells. Her hand fell on my shoulder as she attempted to comfort me. I caught it and tangled our fingers together briefly. I am unsettled. Pay me no mind. I understand your fear, Rhaenyra, I truly do. Please believe me when I say the babe is worth all the troubles pregnancy brings. It was nice of her to try, but I couldn't see myself as a mother. Even if I fed him or her myself, they would still spend most of their childhood being raised by strangers. Your Grace, do I bother asking you what you have been eating, or should I simply request a report from Lady Lena? I don't have the chance to not eat what you require me to. Lena persuaded my father to enforce a ratio of fried food to recommended food. Laner, Rhaenys and even Corlys might have helped. Traitors, every last one of them. Of course, that's not to say I'm not bribing several of the kitchen staff to bring me the forbidden bacon, an egg and mushrooms and sausages. I wish potatoes existed. Then I could have hash browns. Truly, it is a mystery as to where this weight has come from. Don't judge me. Do you know what it's like to have food cravings? That deep-seated need for something, and then when you finally get it, the satisfaction is toe-curling. It's like a nice warm bath after a long day level of satisfying. Your Grace, you must approach your pregnancy with restraint. I know common misconception holds you should indulge your cravings, but this is simply not true. Alanis told me, scribbling in her book. I have been eating fish and eggs and leafy greens and all that. I protested. Alanis gave me an extremely doubtful look before producing her prized stethoscope. It was cold as she poked at my chest and then my stomach with it and noted something down in her records. She had a frown on her face that I did not like one bit. Next, she pushed me gently back onto the bed and pushed aside the gown slightly, hands resting on my abdomen before she began poking and prodding over the swell of my stomach. I glared at it, annoyed it was even there. Damnable sweet tooth and damned craving for fried goods. Honestly, if Rhaenyra and Canon had to deal with this, then I doubt it was pregnancies that ruined her looks, because I very much doubted that woman understood restraint, or the concept of calories. I should remember that. It's not something I added to the book, but knowledge of calories is probably pretty damn important. Another thing for Joffrey to stack onto whatever wisdom he eventually recruits as a proxy for the iodine discovery. I rely on that man too much. I also really disliked the growing frown on Alanis' face. Calories are not as distracting as I'd hoped they'd be. I jumped as Lena's hand slipped into mine and squeezed it reassuringly. She must have noticed me tensing as Alanis removed her hands and tugged the gown back into position. Are you sure you have not felt the baby quicken? She asked, tone careful. Very sure, but surely it is too early. This is my first time after all. Alanis' eyes flickered up to Lena and I wanted to throw up. Your Renera, I need you to stay very calm. My heart leapt into my throat as my heart rate promptly went sky high. Why must people insist on saying things like that? It was on par with, we need to talk. I am not calm, I cannot be calm. Tell me what is wrong. I demanded, hating the way my breath was stuttering in my throat and the way I wanted to flee and cry. You are showing already. Most new mothers do not show until far after, she said slowly. Dread pooled in my stomach and my laugh was a little desperate and high-pitched. Your symptoms are quite pronounced, the sickness, the swelling. I am not showing. I'm not. It's just, puppy fat. Lena is to blame for this. She buys me sweets. Alanis bit her lip and I realized tears were forming in my eyes because I knew what she was about to say and I wanted her to say anything but. Renera, we have to put forward the idea you may be carrying more than one babe. If you like this content, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you later, bye bye.